Welcome to the Green Chair interviews. Today we have Kevin McGeough, who's an archaeologist with the Department of Geography. Welcome, Kevin. Thank you for joining us. We would like to know, what is your philosophy of teaching?
Well, I'm not sure that I have so much a philosophy of teaching as philosophies of teaching. I guess I reconsider my teaching depending on each class, the students that are in the classroom and what their needs are. So I like to change it up and be very flexible in terms of how I approach the subjects in teaching in general. But I would say if you had to boil it down to one key word, that would be empathy. And that's the empathy to try to make sense of where your students are at, how they're best going to be able to deal with the material that you're presenting, how best you're going to be able to elicit ideas and critical thinking from them in relationship to that material, and just in general how to make the experience as rewarding for them as possible.
Okay. So with that said, what would you say a typical class of yours would look like?
It really depends on the level of the class and the type of class. But generally with archaeology, this is a very visually oriented discipline. So what I tend to have are a lot of slides, a lot of images, and I sort of go back and forth between walking students through the slides and sort of providing them with enough background data to be able to make sense of the material, and then stepping back from it and opening up the class for larger discussion, trying to get them to interpret the material and debate what these things mean to them. So I would say that I tend to be a very heavily lecture-based teacher, although I try to engage discussion throughout and periodically throughout, but most of my classes are lecture-oriented, at least in terms of the archaeology. The upper level classes, that's a different situation, and most of those classes I like to see as a conversation, and the less I can speak in those classes, the better. But in the lower level classes, I think lecturing is really one of the best ways to introduce people to archaeology.
Okay. So out of all those things that you've mentioned, are there any things that haven't really worked well in your class, or things that you find have worked really well?
You know, one of the things that I found is that everything can work well and can work poorly. And in a lot of ways it depends on who the group is and how you're gelling with that group, what the time of day is. One of the most interesting teaching experiences for me was when I was team teaching in the liberal education program with Bruce McKay. And we would teach the exact same class at 12 o'clock and then again at 3 o'clock. And so I would teach the class at 12 and things would go great. I think it would just work perfectly. And then I'd try it again a couple hours later and it would be completely flat and just wouldn't work. And it could be the other way around. So I'd try something in the morning or the noon lecture. I'd try it out, see what would work. It just wouldn't play out. And then later on in the afternoon, it would be perfectly fine. And so that's one of the things that's really shocked me about teaching is you just can't predict that, at least with the smaller level classes. The first year level courses that I teach, they're usually around 250 people. Those things, when you have that large of a group, the reaction tends to be more predictable, right? And so you can sort of guess what the whole crowd is going to react to in certain situations. But for anything less than 50, I think it really, really varies depending on the group and the time of day.
Okay. So without really being able to predict how a class is going to go, how do you best prepare for a class?
Yeah, I think the best way to prepare for a class is to be prepared to change things on the fly, to let it be as flexible as you possibly can be, right? So if something just isn't working, you have to be comfortable enough to sort of stop and start over again, try something new, try a different approach, work at it from a different angle. And I think having that kind of flexibility and the confidence to be flexible in that basically allows you to work through any sort of problems that might emerge. Or if something's working really, really well, you have to be comfortable enough to just sort of drop what your plan was for the rest of that class and just follow that through, right? I mean, you just can't predict how these things are going to work. And I think that's one of the real benefits that we have in the classroom as opposed to online learning or other approaches to learning where you don't have the group together, is that you don't have that dynamic to be able to sort of follow the story wherever it goes. When you have a class, you have groups of people right there with you. You can sort of build the conversation together and see where you want to take things. And so just being flexible enough to be able to do that makes a world of difference to my mind.
Wow, that sounds really wonderful. Well, thank you for joining us today, and yeah, it was really great to have you here.
Thank you.